Okay, let's get right into it. We're going to be breaking down a really fascinating text called Dignitas Omnium, which means the dignity of all. Now, just to be clear, this isn't an official Vatican document. Instead, it's a powerful analysis that really gets into one of the most complex conversations happening right now, the collision between centuries of Catholic tradition and our modern understanding of gender and trans identity. So what we're going to do here is unpack the core arguments from this analysis and see how it frames this huge challenge, a challenge that has very real stakes for millions of people. And it all really boils down to one central, pretty provocative question that the document makes us face. Can an ancient faith, one that's built on a very specific understanding of creation, find a way to embrace a modern, more fluid understanding of human identity? That's the big question we're going to keep in mind as we go through this. So let's start with the traditional foundation, right? The source document explains that the Catholic Church's official teaching is really built on a binary view of humanity. It sees male and female as these two distinct, complementary parts of a divine plan. But as we're about to see, this long-held doctrine is under some serious pressure from science, from social change, and from the principles of human rights. Now this quote, wow, it really gets to the heart of the Vatican's concern. This is a direct quote from Pope Francis in 2024, and it's cited in the source. He calls gender theory the ugliest danger of our time. The deep fear being expressed here is that if we move beyond a strict male-female binary, it's not an act of inclusion. To them, it's an act of erasure, erasing what they see as these essential, God-given differences. But this is where the source document pushes back, and it pushes back hard. It actually calls this kind of rhetoric a double trick. First, it says the Pope's statement kind of reduces all of humanity down to just our gender, totally ignoring our values, our attitudes, our affections. And second, and this is a huge point, it says this view clashes directly with the foundation of universal human rights. The source reminds us that human rights apply to everyone regardless of their characteristics, not because of them. All right, so let's flip the script now and look at the other side of this debate. The source spends a good amount of time explaining the ideas from modern gender theory that are challenging the Church's position, ideas that are fundamentally redefining how we even think about identity itself. And this is not a new conversation. The source gives us a quick little history lesson. It all kicks off back in 1949 with Simone de Beauvoir's famous line, "One is not born a woman, one becomes one." Then you jump to 1972, when sociologist Anne Oakley formally separated biological sex from social gender. And by 1990, philosopher Judith Butler comes along and introduces a radical new idea that changed everything: performativity. So what on earth is performativity? It's a really key concept to get your head around. The source explains Butler's theory that gender isn't some fixed internal truth you're born with. Instead, it's something we do. It's like a continuous social performance built up by us repeating the actions, the clothes, and the behaviors that our culture has labeled as masculine or feminine. Basically, we're all kind of performing gender every single day. And this brings us right to the heart of the conflict. This is where these two very different worldviews collide most intensely: the debate over transgender identity. This is the issue where all those abstract ideas about theology and gender theory become deeply, deeply personal and tangible. Now, what's really fascinating here is that the source points out a debate that's happening within feminism itself. So on one side, you have the gender-critical view, represented here by the German feminist Alice Schwarzer. She argues that biological sex is a fundamental, unchangeable reality. But on the other side, the source document argues that this view just oversimplifies biology, which it turns out is far from a simple binary. This quote from Schwarzer, which is presented in the source, really lays out the gender-critical position in no uncertain terms. The argument is that no matter what medical interventions someone has or what their social identity is, their core biological sex, defined at the chromosomal level, is constant. It draws a really hard line between biology and identity. But this is where the source hits back with the science. It points out that the idea of a strict XX or XY binary is, well, scientifically incomplete. Biology itself is full of so much diversity. As you can see, the document lists things like chromosomal variations, intersex conditions, and other variants of sex development to argue that nature itself doesn't fit neatly into just two boxes.
So the crucial point here is all about language. Words matter, right? The source analyzes the rhetoric being used, arguing that terms like genital mutilation aren't just neutral descriptions. It calls this discursive well poisoning, basically language that's designed to frame a really complex medical and personal journey as a moral failing, which shuts down any kind of compassionate dialogue before it can even start.
Okay, so after laying out this really deep conflict, the source document doesn't just leave us hanging. It actually tries to chart a path forward. It suggests that the common ground for resolving this might not be found in theology or biology alone, but in the universal framework of human rights. And this slide is incredibly direct. Our source text, Dignitas Omnium, presents a super clear conflict analysis. It takes a recent Vatican document, Dignitas Infinita, and argues that its rejection of gender transition directly violates foundational articles of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, specifically the right to be recognized as a person and the right to physical and mental integrity. That is a bold claim that frames this whole thing as an issue of fundamental rights. So, based on that human rights conflict, what's the solution? Well, the source outlines a pretty clear four-step path toward reconciliation. It argues the whole process has to start with repentance, followed by genuine listening to the people who've been harmed. From there, the next steps are very concrete: changing the official language to be more inclusive, and finally, a tangible reform of the laws and sanctions within the church that are seen as discriminatory. And all of this leaves us right here with this one massive, powerful question that gets to the absolute core of this explainer. The document, Dignitas Omnium, is built on the idea that dignity is for everyone. But it forces us to ask, in the face of our evolving human understanding and universal rights, where do we draw the line? Where does cherished tradition end? And where does the absolute imperative of human rights begin? That's the question we're left to think about.